We have 52 participants and 16 facilitators from all over the world, really. We are in 5 continents. We represent people from 5 continents. We have, in our cohort, we have 27 nationalities. And correct me if I miss any, you know, I'm doing my best here. We have Chile, we have Uruguay. Ahí está, listo, ahí, we have Colombia, Venezuela, double passport there, Rasta. We have Brazil. Yeah. We have Panama. We have Costa Rica. We have your Costa Ricans here. And we have US. We have Canada. We have England. We have Netherlands. We have Italy. That's myself. I'm a dual citizen. We have New Zealand. Yeah, Hadassah too. Yeah. Australia. We have Samoa. We have Burkina Faso, Togo, South Africa. We have Cameroon. We have Mauritania. We have China. We have Cambodia. We have Singapore. We have India. We have Korea. And we have Taiwan. Am I missing anyone?
Yes, Papua New Guinea. PNG.
Thank you, Gita. And then this
21st. One other. Malawi. You forgot Kona.
Kona, yeah. Then those 28 nationalities work in 17 nations. They work in Costa Rica, they work in Panama, they work in Brazil, Mexico, US, Uruguay, they work in France, they work in Switzerland, they work in Cambodia, they work in India, they work in China and Singapore, they work in Lebanon, they work in Mauritania, they work in Nigeria, they work in Togo, and they work in Malawi and Uganda. Egypt, working in Taiwan, Canada. All right, so this is our crew. And we are so honored, Loren, to present this wonderful cohort from participants and facilitators. And we really want to hear from you. We want to hear from the wisdom as how the Lord has led you in your journey. What has that been like? And just to get us started, we have one question for you. And that one is, what's been the hardest and most challenging place you have ever been to, and how did the Lord lead you into that? And I want to ask Hadassah if she can pray for us. Pray for Loren as we start. And Loren, over to you.
Can I pray in Portuguese?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Deus, muito obrigada por esse dia. Muito obrigado por essa aula, por esse tempo que a gente está tendo aqui, através do mundo inteiro. Eu peço mesmo que o Senhor abençoe a vida do Loren, continue abençoando, né? Que o Senhor dê as palavras certas para ele hoje, para nos ensinar, para nos confrontar. Enfim, Deus, nós agradecemos muito pela vida dele, por tudo que ele tem feito em seu nome, dentro da Jocum, e, enfim, somos todos frutos dele. Então, pedimos mesmo que o Senhor abençoe esse tempo e que nós possamos mesmo aprender o máximo que conseguimos hoje com ele. Em nome de Jesus, amém.
Amém.
Obrigado. It's good to see you all. I just am thrilled that I can travel around the world like this without jet lag. So good to see you, Winterford, over in Papua New Guinea. You've been very kind to me down there, and I can go through the list here all over the world and say it's good to see you again. Yeah, and I better tell you this, because you'll be wondering on close-ups, what's wrong with my nose? I just a little over 2 weeks ago, I had to have a nose job, they call it, to make your face look better. But actually, it was to remove the cancer. And And so it was a 5-hour ordeal. And so it left a few scabs there, but it's almost all gone. And they had to take some, go back to the lab, take some more, eventually. But I did check with some of my relatives because we have the same DNA. I went to different ones with this, but one of them was my sister Janice. I said, look, Janice, you have the same DNA. Would you give me your nose? I said, you do writing. You don't have to go out in public. I found out people don't love me as much as they said they did. Anyway, I had some fun with my nose. Yeah, I had a big old patch there on for a while, but now I'm down just a few scars left. But having said that, we'll go to the. I guess that's one of my journeys. That was a difficult one, but not really. That was really rather easy, after getting through it. But with, I was thinking about the country of Libya. Now, some of them I'm going to have to make you guess what they are because I don't want to be on Zoom because it goes through one of the biggest cities of the biggest country in the world. But when I think about it, I'm also considering that Marcus Stephan may be there somewhere in the room. I haven't seen him yet, but he'll be a part of this to confirm, and also Magdi Michel as well. And so I don't think Saber is here, but Michel might be. But anyway, as I think about the word of the Lord for me when I was 13, that I was to go to every country in the world. And how many are there? Well, it depends. If you look at sovereign nations or even the membership of United Nations, you're only at 190, what is it, 6 now? And but if you look at Britannica, including all the dependent countries, a dependent country is like Greenland is dependent on Denmark, but yet they have even a parliament and a president and 50,000 people there, and but they don't have the full capacity to have international relationships and soldiers and so on. So when I think of all those, that's 241 presently. It can be changing, and I've been to South Sudan and Kosovo and some of the new ones. But when you're going into these countries, if each one of them have their own set of laws. So I was actually, when I was asked this question by about a week ago by an 11-year-old, what was the hardest place to go into? And that got my mind going. And out of these, when I tell you the story, I'm going to stick with the storyline. But out of it, you will see principles. And this is how I learned so much in what leadership principles you have to follow when you're obeying some particular word of the Lord. And I believe that every word from the Lord has principles that are biblical that you're going to find out while you obey that particular word. So I want you to react back after I tell this story. But in order to tell it, it's like when you ask me what time it is. Before I give you the time, I give you the history of the watch. In other words, I want you to see the context of what we're doing. So the word of the Lord was I was to go to Libya because that was my last country in the world. And at that time, there were no new countries that came along, a couple of them later. But when I started out to do this, I wanted to know, Lord, how do I go? and he told me to go to Tunisia. And so I was going to go that direction. And this brings up a question: when God tells you something, is it a test or is it an actuality that you're going to go through? And if you're trying to deal with the infinite God and his infinite knowledge and his infinite power and his infinite presence and his infinite feelings, omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, and omniscience. And so if you're going to deal with that, good luck. You're only finite, and you're just going to have to stick with the Bible. And that's all I want to do. I don't want to get into anthropomorphic ideas and all of those. They use big words to deal with questions they don't know how to answer. That's how I found the theologians do it. But anyway, on I started out by going to Tunisia, and I wanted to test out the way I was planning to go was overland, and I would go with the car into Libya. And I had a friend in YWAM that was Magdi Saber from Egypt, and Egyptians didn't have to have passports, didn't have to have visas for Libya. So he was going to fly in and meet me there in Tunisia, but I'd gone a little early, and I'd once traveled across one of the North African nations that I'll not name here, but I found that if I went at 4:30 in the morning, the guy was asleep at the border, and he looked up and he just goes like this, and I went right on through, and that was legal, and so that's what I'd like to do. And so I was then going to go over into the other neighboring country, and so I was heading to the border on my own before Magdi came in from Egypt, and I had a jacket on. It was cool time of year there, and I went up to the northernmost point of Africa, and I think it's called Bishkek. They're in Tunisia, and if you look at cardinal points, that is, on every continent, there's one point that goes further north or further west or further east or further south, and I wanted to go to the cardinal point there, as I do when I can do that. So that's just a hobby, I guess. I don't know, but I go there and pray over the continent, and so I did that, and then I drove on. By the way, I rented a car from Camel Rent-A-Car. That's in Tunis, and so I was heading toward the border, and I put my hand in my pocket, a jacket there, and I found I had a shekel. That's not something you want to be found in that part of the world. It's it's an Israel coin. So it had been raining, and the farm there had a lot of water on it, and so I buried it in water, throwing it out the window. And I hope the farmer didn't get in trouble later. But as I got to the border, I thought this will be an easy crossing. But first of all, I need to deal with my exit. And when I did, they wanted to see my suitcase. So I brought it in, and that started a 2-hour, 6 different people interviewing me, I'll call it, make it softer. But they were really convinced. They said, "You do speak Arabic?" And I said, "No, all I know is Sokran." And I said it with a really good American Texas accent. And they said, "No, you do." And I said, "No, I don't." And and then they said, "You're a spy for Israel." I said, "No, I'm not a spy. That's ridiculous." And then they said, "Well, you're married to an Israeli." I said, "No, my wife was born in Canada and she's a blonde." And so it went like this. I never had so much peace in my life. This is one thing that I can tell you, in the most difficult times and the most possible problem times, the peace of God can be on you. And I'll tell you maybe during these days about a time when I didn't have peace, when I thought we were going to crash in a jet. And we were just a few feet off the ground by this time. But those kinds of experiences are going to come to you. If you're going to go to every country in the world, you're going to have challenges, and whatever kind they are. And I've had sickness, hepatitis and malaria at the same time, thinking I could have died at that time. There's no doubt about that one. And I was all alone getting from one country to the next, and I was really, really, really sick for I don't know how long. I went unconscious for a while. But those challenges give you something important every time you go through them. And it's important, like the cowboy song they sing in Texas, if you find yourself in the middle of hell, don't stop, keep on going until you get out the other side. But the whole thing that happened to me is they were convinced and had my passport in the other room talking to headquarters that I was some kind of a spy. And so finally, the head guy, he went out, got a driver, pulled up with a car, left the doors open, and he was coming in to take me under arrest. And so I was standing there, and they said to me, "Now, one more time, why are you here?" And I just remembered something, and my jacket was zipped up, and I had a surgery right here in the middle of my abdomen here, and had my gallbladder removed. And the surgeon said to me, he said, "Well, you travel in some crazy places sometime, and if you ever have an appendicitis attack, you'll die, because you got to have answers right away. Shall I take your appendix?" I said, "Take anything you need, just get it out of the way, and just as long as it's not too much, that I can still move on." And so they took my appendix and my gallbladder. Well, in the process, they weakened some of the skin here, not the top skin, but underneath that, and it broke loose. So I had a big, almost like the size of a grapefruit, sticking out right here in the middle, and I had this polo shirt over, and so I opened I said, "You see this?" And I opened it, and I mean, these guys their eyes bugged out, looking at this big round thing here sticking out. And I said, "Do you see this?" I said, "Next week," and this was the truth, "I have an appointment in California for surgery, and you never know what's going to happen to you." And I said, and they looked at it, and they said, "Well, why are you here?" I wanted to visit your beautiful country, and I wanted to meet some people here. And so they said, "Oh, okay." Now they're scared, because here's an American going to die if they put me in jail, and And so suddenly they said, okay, you can go now. Anyway, by that time I was deciding I'm not going to go, because I'm going to come right back in. And so I'm going to stay in. I turned around, went back, and got a hotel until Magdi came. And at the hotel, though, they bugged my phone. And it was a terrible thing. You could hear Arabic music going on in the background, and they just were not very sharp. But one guy, I noticed there's a van outside with 4 men in it. One of them came in with designer jeans and, dark glasses. I mean, he'd been seeing too many movies, but he was secret police. He wasn't very secret at all. I was sitting reading a book there in the lobby, and I was actually waiting for the time when I was to go to the airport and meet Saber. And as I'm reading it, he's trying to see what I'm reading, so I held it over so he could see. And he seemed to be satisfied, and he went out, and I peeked out then, and he's telling the others what he, found out on all his secret police work. But then when I went out and got in the taxi to go to the airport, I noticed they followed me. Now I have peripheral vision. I can see my hands about 210, around here. And I never looked back at them, but I saw they were following me out to the airport. And I got there and I got out of the car, paid the guy, turned, never looked at them, but they were only a few feet behind me. And I took my suitcase and went in. Well, I looked back out and I watched them drive away. They figure, he's going now, and we can get back to our shish kebab. And so I waited in there just not long, and here came Saber down the escalator. We went over to Hertz Rent-A-Car because we were told we can drive into Libya with Hertz. And so we headed out, and I was driving. We're going across the desert, and we were trying to get there at about 4:30 the next morning. And it was somewhere in the late afternoon that we had a flat tire. And that was kind of strange because it was a fairly new car and I shouldn't have had a flat. We changed it, and I took the tire and I threw it into the trunk. And I'm strong in my upper body, and but I shouldn't have done that, because right away something happened in my back. Now I got a fragile back because of rolling in the van 3 times, because I was hit in the back with a motorcycle, went flying over the back of the top. I've got a few stories on those, but there's certain times when my back goes out, I can really be immobilized. So I was hoping it didn't happen, but as I drove by 9 o'clock, I was in such pain. I said, Magdi, I'm sorry, but I got to stop tonight and get a hotel here. And I saw a town off to my left, and it was 12 kilometers. And in the light of the night, you could see it there. And so I went over and I said, as we pulled up, I got out and I found I couldn't walk. I could only shuffle. And I was stiff as a board. And I know when I do that, I can't bend. I can't sit down again, and I can't bend. If I lay down, I can't bend. I have to have help. I'm like a board. And so I usually have to sleep on the floor when I'm like that. And I said, would you ask them to put a piece of plywood on my bed so I can lay down? And so they did that. Now, he gave me a map the next morning, and I was looking at the map, and I just couldn't bend. And so I had to be helped in any way. So as I was laying there, I was looking on the map, and I said, now, Magdi, go out to this point. There's a right at the border, there's an oasis. And if you'll go there, you will find there's some camels that'll come. And we'll wait there until camels come, and we'll get them to pay them to take us over into Libya, drop us off. They can go on their way. And yes, I knew there was a possibility, a very strong possibility, I'd be arrested, because it was against the law my American law said I couldn't go to Libya. My Libyan law said Americans can't come to Libya. You know, you kind of feel rejected. And yet God was saying I was to go. And so I knew there was that possibility that I'd go to prison and Magdi would probably be let go because they had good relationships there from Egypt. And he didn't even need a visa. So I'd be there without a visa. I would be illegal. And so I waited for him because I knew that if this was a test, the Lord would allow me to get healed and I could ride a camel. And I knew this from a time in Switzerland. This was 1969. And it was at our first school. And I had been invited to speak at a missionary conference on the other side of Switzerland. At that time, they didn't have the big auto route, or the roads were just simply little crooked roads. And I had to go for 2 hours. Well, my back went out. I had lifted a suitcase the wrong way and put it into a little Volkswagen Bug. And my back went out. And so I had to lay on the floor, and the boys would come in the morning and stand me up. And there was no way I could travel across Switzerland. That would be at that time a couple of hours or more. And so I asked the teacher that week, he was a missionary, and I said, would you go? It's a missionary conference, and take my place. And I called, and that's the way we did it. And that was Friday. Saturday, he called back and he said, Loren, I know what you're into, but God keeps telling me you're to be here. You're to be here. And I said, I know. He's telling me that. So the next morning, Sunday morning, all the churches had come together and into one place. And I said, tell them that I can't come in and sit down. I'll come in and I'll stand up and preach, and then I'll have to go out. So I got suit and tie. At that time, you had to have that, and got all dressed up. And one of our vans, we had made it from a bakery truck. They fixed it so I could lay out in it, gave me some ropes so that when they're going around the curves, I could hold myself steady. So for 2 hours, I was like that. And I went in just a little ahead of the service time for me to start. And I stood in the vestibule, and then they announced for me, and I went up and started preaching. And I had a young man there that had a word from the Lord through a prophet over in Germany. This is the German part of Switzerland. And so he was translating for me. And as I was speaking, this translator had 2 years before heard that American would come and release him into a global ministry. And so I didn't know this. He knew that. But he didn't know who the American was. He never had learned that yet. And so as I'm preaching away, suddenly I was totally healed. Not healed, but I was totally normal again. I could bend, I could do anything. Just, whatever had seized up, it was now gone. And I was able to sit down. I was able to ride back in a normal way. And that translator was Rudy Locke. And he's our first European to join YWAM on a full-time basis, I mean. So that released him into his ministry. And that's why the enemy was trying to block me from going to that meeting, because he became our bumblebee, we called him. He would go and bring nectar out of the flowers, and deposit them back. And he was the first one, YWAMer, to go to the biggest country in the world. And he was a lot of things that he could do with his Swiss passport. But I found in that learning that I could expect that if I would cross that border, I'd be okay. And so that's what I expected. Then when he came back, Magdi, from the border at the Oasis, he said, there are soldiers everywhere. They're doing a exercise all along the border. I said, okay. He said, and by the way, the border is closed. No one is going either direction. Oh, okay. I said, go find a helicopter. We'll find a way, put it on the credit card, and they can take us over, drop us, come back, and they'll be okay. And we'll find a way then to get into the cities. And so he came back. He said, nobody will. They said we'll be shot down, and they don't want to lose their helicopter or their life. I said, okay, go to the island of Jaffa. That's where boats are. And we'll have a boat go out to the beaches, and they'll drop us on the beach. They'll come back and they'll be safe, and we will be inside. And he came back. He said, Loren, it's Sunday morning. And I'd been there now. Was it 2 nights or 3 nights? And so he came back. He said, no one will do that. They risk losing not only their boat, but their life. And they can't do it. So I said, Lord, are you blocking me? He said, yes, get up and go home. I was normal immediately. I could get up. We jumped in the vehicle, drove back to the airport. I got into Switzerland in the afternoon. And as I came in, they met me and they said, a speaker didn't show up at this group of 1,200 young people. Are you able to speak tonight? And I said, sure. And that's the way we went. Well, 2 days later, Marcus and I went to Bhutan out in Asia. And, but that's another story. But there, I wanted to say, I asked Darlene to pray with me. Why did you, God, tell me to go to Tunis and go to Tunisia with the idea that I would cross the border? He said, I was testing you to see if you would go to prison still or not. That was something I had to deal with a long time before, because that was very real. And I had been under arrest once in Damascus by a soldier taking me away to prison. I was in another, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I was surrounded by police, and they were going to take me in, and somebody in each case talked them out of it. But that those were experiences that were very real. And I just had the other one at the border and on the other side of Tunisia as well. So I said, okay, God, you see I'm willing. And so here's all I have to say. You can argue with the theology, but God said to Abraham, whenever he was taking his son Isaac to Mount Moriah to sacrifice him, with the word of the Lord. And he said, no, I will provide myself a sacrifice. Now, Mount Moriah is the same as Mount Zion. You'll see that in Chronicles. And but you'll also see that on the map if you get it out. But Mount Zion is the place where Mount Calvary is a part of. That's where Jesus died. And Isaac was told he was to be a sacrifice on that same mountain. And so when Abraham followed through and obeyed the Lord, he didn't say, well, you said a mountain, Mount Moriah, but this other mountain is closer. You can't say that. If he says Mount Moriah, you go to Mount Moriah. because it had to do with that which would come later as a prophetic word about Jesus himself. And Isaac was to be a type of Jesus, but not Jesus. And so when he obeyed, then the Lord came through an angel and said, take the ram in the thicket. And so he provided himself a sacrifice, literally himself. And so as we see that, I said, okay, Lord, well, you know. And I passed my test, in other words, but I still had to go. But Darlene had a word when we prayed, you are going to go into the front door next time, not the back door. Well, I had to go in legally. And so that meant I had to, first of all, I called my good friend. He was on our advisory board, but he was one of the top ambassadors in America. And he called the State Department. Colin Powell was the Secretary of State. And Colin Powell was out of country, but his deputy took the call because Bill Turner was his name, Ambassador Turner. He was really respected highly. And he said, I'm appealing for Loren Cunningham if you will allow him to go into his last country on earth, and that's Libya. And the guy said, well, we will not in any way indict him or cause him grief, but neither will we help him if he gets in trouble. And I said, okay, that's fine. And I made friends with the ambassador to Libya from Switzerland. I even was in his home on Saturday, and he's a good guy and so on, but he's very careful on everything he said. I mean, everything he said. And he handed me one of the green books, that had been so-called written by Gaddafi. And, but he couldn't help me. He tried, but he couldn't. Then I was in London. I wrote a letter, sent it through the Libyan embassy and when I was in Cairo, and to Gaddafi, and I said, I'd like to come and pray for you. And so I never got an answer. So I was in London, and I was with Lord McCall. He's one of the members of Parliament, of House of Lords. And he said, oh, I can help you get into Libya. He was a cardiologist as well as a politician. And he said, I saved his father's life, and he sends me a Christmas card every year. And so he wrote with my letter that I wanted to come and pray for him. But I never got a response even then. And so the same happened with Switzerland. But it was sometime later that I got a visa. And then Magdi Michal, and he had an Egyptian passport, and Marcus, he had a Swiss one. They could go in. And so now I could go in. So we decided and felt in God that we were to go together. We prayed over that. As they were praying for us.
Loren, you just said you got a visa. After all this, I have to explain why you just got a visa, because you couldn't get a visa. How did you get a visa?
The only way I could have gotten a visa was the dictator told the guy, go ahead and give him a visa. But I don't know the exact answer to that. But that's a good question.
This was after you sent 2 letters asking to pray with him.
Yeah, actually, I sent 3 letters. Yeah, one from each embassy. But when I got there, by the way, he never would see me, and so yeah, I didn't get to do that. But that's getting ahead of it. When we were leaving there at the YWAM base, we were outside and having a prayer meeting. They're praying over us. One of the young lady. She's quite prophetic. She said, I had a word. I was praying for you this morning early, and I saw 3 strands of pearls around the neck, and one of them broke and fell. And one of you, they're going to not allow in. And so we must pray that that'll be changed. And she said, and I thought, oh, here comes another one for me. And she says, and it's you, Magdi. Wow, that was a surprise. He's the Egyptian. He can go. He doesn't even have a visa. And but we said, okay, let's pray. So they prayed. And you see, when prophecies come, they often come to say, well, this is what you're going to ask. Why did God give us a prophecy, give her a prophecy that one of them wouldn't go in? Well, it doesn't have to happen. You got to pray. Okay, so you can ask those questions. But anyway, we prayed, and we prayed for Magdi. So when we went, we got on a Swiss Air. I always choose the best I can. Do the possible, let God do the impossible. And that would be the neutral airline. And we went by Swiss Air, landed, went in with our passports, and we sent Magdi ahead because they wanted us to change money. And we went over to find out what the change rate was. And it was sky high. In fact, we had breakfast the next day and using the local currency. And it was the equivalent. All we had was 1 boiled egg, 1 piece of toast, and a cup of tea or coffee. And it cost us, in the equivalent of dollars, over $100. That's how off the exchange rate was. In other words, they took your dollar, instead of giving you 10, they gave you 1. And so everything was way off. And so Magdi had gone ahead, and when they said, now you have to change $1,000. And no one of us had were near $1,000. And he said, well, that isn't fair because we didn't know that. And the guy just went off. I mean, he really got angry. You fair? What do you know about fair? And he said, you get back on the plane to Magdi. The others can come, but you can't. Just like that. Shut it down. And he came back and he was literally shaken. He got out of line and came back. Well, on the plane, the man that was to escort us inside, his son was there, and the man his role was tourism. And his son came over to us and gave us brochures and so on the plane. He was still a teenager, but later teens. And he was happy to meet us because his father had told him that we would be on the plane. There were very few people on the plane, by the way. And so he had gone ahead, but he saw this problem that Magdi ran into. Well, he must have gone down and warned his father. So as a result of this, Magdi came back shaken, and I said, let's pray. And I said, just go back and apologize and see if by this time everybody else had gone through. And again, there weren't very many. And so the guy cooled off. He said, okay, you can go and you don't have to exchange money even, because he humbled himself. And he said, but they have to. So he came back to tell us, we put all of our money together, and he said $1,000. So we found that we could get there with that, and you couldn't use a credit card or anything. So we'd put our money in our pockets, just in case. Well, we had to use them now. And so we went downstairs. Everybody had already gone. and the boy apparently told his father, and he took off. Everyone runs in fear, totally. This is something you have to learn in certain nations. And as we were told later by the Christian working underground, he was Egyptian, but he'd been there all of his life. His father had a job there. And he said, my father told me even as a boy, son, you'll only stay alive if you stay afraid. Now, keep your fear. And that's the only way you're going to make it. And so I didn't have any fear. And I don't think the other two either. We didn't have the spirit of fear. And yet it was the conquering principality in the nation. And so we were free. And as we did, we went in, I said, well, get us a taxi. And he did. And we went to the hotel where we had already paid the way, we thought, through our visas or whatever it was, cards. And they said, no, we don't have any room for you here. Once again, the word got out, fear. These guys are not to be, don't touch them. And so I said, well, let's walk and we'll get another hotel. They don't know anything. And so we went over there and we got into another hotel. Again, all the rooms are bugged. And we'd go out on the little porch there. We were second floor, but a lanai, we'd call it here, and talk out there. And we had a contact through Magdi, and we were going to meet him the next morning, which we did. And I was taking a picture of a hotel built by the Swiss, not a hotel, a hospital, specialized hospital. And he was driving and he yelled out the window, stop that, and stopped taking the picture. Another one. And I'll meet you on the next street over. He couldn't stop there now because I was taking a picture. And that's why you had to be escorted with somebody who was from the government, who would tell you, yes, you can take that picture, but not that, and so on. So there's no freedom. And it's all controlled by people who have great fear. And they are under fear of the next one, and they are under fear of the next one. And it's all fear from the principality down through the leader. And the leaders usually sleep in different places, like Stalin. He always had 6 or 7 houses, and no one knew which one. He wouldn't even tell his guards which one he was going to sleep in that night. Fidel Castro had the same thing. I was in Cuba when he was still alive and leading. And so you have to recognize when you are there, you are free, and therefore it's a part of the go, means a change of location. You have to go to places in order that freedom will come, and it comes from God through people that have been sent. Freedom and much, much more. But I would learn this along the way. As we spent 4 days there, I think it was 4, and we were able to go to an upper room out at the edge. I love the name, upper room. It was just an apartment, second floor up. And we were able to do things quietly because we were inside a vehicle that somebody local was driving and so on. And so that was our friend who was a Christian, and he had a special deal. But he took us to one place in the beautiful mansions all around, this special part of Tripoli. And there was one vacant lot that was just totally empty. He said, I wanted you to see this lot as he drove by. No, don't don't look too much at it. Just quickly see it. And he's driving by on a little, just a suburb road and avenue. And so we looked and it's just flat. He said a few days ago, there was a beautiful mansion there. He was one of the top and closest confidants to the leader and the dear leader. And so as the leader said, the next step we need to do is so and so and so and so. And he said, oh, that's wonderful, which you would always say to a dictator. That's wonderful, whatever you say. And then he said, and because of that, look what we can do. He was an implicational thinker. He said, that opens up even this. Look how good that is. Gaddafi did not like anybody adding anything to what he said. And that man was dead within the hour. And that day, his whole house with furniture, clothing, everything, only his family fled. And with what they had on their back, and everything was taken and thrown away to the dump. Fear. And if you have the spirit of fear, you're not a missionary. You can't go. And so we were able to learn so much. And when we started to exit, I counted how many times I had to answer questions. And the first was the check-in. Well, you had one of the Swiss representatives, but you also had somebody standing by him. And so that was our check-in, then passport, everything. And the next one, then you did your luggage, and the next one, and the next one. And about the third or fourth one, I had gone with my passport. And then I went to the next one, and this guy started talking to that guy when I'm standing there. And then they talked for some time. I'm standing there, and they're all in Arabic, and I didn't know what was going on, and they didn't know English. And so Marcus had gone on through, no problem, Swiss. And behind me was Magdi. And finally they called for the guy, their boss. He came, he had all kinds of braids and, he was very high up. And so he asked me, he said, who was your travel agent? I didn't know. And so Magdi answered him in Arabic. Oh, he said, go ahead, you can go through. So I passed that one. And then there was another one at the foot of an escalator, and another one. I counted 12 altogether. There's 2 more there. But at our 10th one we'd passed, we were in the waiting room, and Marcus said to me, we're finally free. I said, we're not free. Don't think you're free yet. And sure enough, as we went out, we had the 11th one. And they once again asked us questions and so on. Then we got on, sat down in the plane, Swiss Air. He said, well, we're free now. I said, we're not free. Sure enough, a man came in and looking at everybody, and he checked everybody on the plane. And then when he left, Marcus said, now we're taxiing. We are free. I said, we're not free. They can call us back. And I said, when we got out so many miles away from the country, I said, now we're free. The next one was Malta. And so we were free. We could go. So that's my story. And I think there's quite a few principles. What do you get?
Go for it. So, 15 minutes. ¿Tomamos preguntas o los puntos? ¿Ah? Un par. Okay, so we'll take just a couple of questions and then I'll share with you guys some of the stuff that I wrote down. So could we take somebody from Lausanne or somebody online? Do we have a question there? Can you raise your hand? Anyone?
Right here, right here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, dale, Jorge.
A question or an answer?
Oh, no. It's just one of the points that you mentioned, Loren, that as we go, you said, as we go, no matter where you go in the world, you will have challenges. And but challenges give you something important when you go through them. And that's, I think, a very good lesson for all of us as we are trying to teach this to others and lead others into this.
Awesome. Thank you, Jorge.
Hi, Bruno here from Switzerland. By the way, Switzerland and Germany were not on the list. Giacomo, you can add them.
There you go, my friend.
Thank you, Loren, for sharing. What I'm taking out of it, what really impresses me and challenges me is how you are not giving up when there's circumstances telling you it's not working. You were trying to go over the water, over the air. You knew the word of the Lord. Circumstances were telling you no, but you were pushing through until the Lord said no. And thank you. That's a real encouragement and a real challenge at the same time.
Hey, Loren, Jordan here in Switzerland. A comment and then a question. Just if I understood the story right, the going to Libya the first time was a test to see how that you lay down in your life to go to prison and conquering that fear. And my question is, because you said you can't have the spirit of fear and be a missionary. So does God test you in the areas of your fears so that you can overcome them? Is that how you conquer your fears?
That's a good question. And because the spirit of fear there's a difference between the fear of the Lord and what we're talking about here. But you have to overcome the fear to overcome the fear in the nation. And what I didn't include is in the upper room, when I walked in, they told me ahead of time, they said, we have a code word that we say on the phone to our friends. And these were underground workers, missionaries, and they all had jobs and so on. But they said, we heard there was a guest that was coming. We didn't know who it was. But as soon as I walked in, somebody recognized me and said, oh, thank God you've been sent. And I didn't know what he meant by that, but there was something there that that ministered to him, just the fact I would come. And then they said, this is such a dry time. And when they said that, the whole understanding came to me why I had come for their sake. And I said, no, it's only dry outside of you. You are the one that pulls down the rain. So I gave them an illustration. I was in the Amazon sleeping in hammocks waiting for some of our YWAMers to come down from another part of the Amazon to meet with them. And I was there with the scientist, and he told how the trees bring down the rain. But then he showed us how shallow the soil was. And it's mostly chalky type salad, land and dirt. And so the trees had fallen, and it was building on the trees, new trees. And so there was not enough soil to give nutrients. It had to be fallen trees. Now, if you'll put that into spiritual terms, even of Stephen falling, on that, you get a pall coming out. And so you lay down your life and you say, I didn't have any fruit in my life. Well, wait a minute. It's in the next tree that the fruit comes. That's the end of chapter 11 of the faith chapter in Hebrews. They didn't get to see the results of their ministry so that the next group could find it. And then I said, you are the trees, and the life comes, the water comes for you. I was up in the Admiralty Islands, that's north of Papua New Guinea and that area. And it was raining this morning, and I was going out to get to my plane to go to another island. And it was raining, and I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a rough ride the whole way. And as soon as we came across the beach, it was sunshine. And then I looked, and the clouds were only over islands where there were trees pulling down. So I gave that illustration. And when I did, they said, oh, we just had our first convert, by the way, and we're going to baptize him. And what do we do? He's, because if they find out he's a Christian and so on. I said, first of all, don't use the word Christian. Use the word Jesus. It's his name that is lifted up, not Christianity. That's the culture. And the culture isn't all perfect, but Jesus is. And so they said that's an answer there. Otherwise, they were going to kill his grandparents and his, all the rest. But Jesus is mentioned 40 times in even the Quran. But he said, if I be lifted up, and so you don't lift up all of Christianity, but because we know that, I know that you and I are perfect, but I do worry about you. That's what the guy said. Anyway, in great humility, of course. But the idea is they were seeing, that's why they were there. It didn't mean that they had to go preaching on the streets and get shot at the moment, but it meant they were there to obey the Lord and have the presence of Jesus, and that would draw down the blessings into the nation. That's why we go to every country. That's even before, as the young man did, he went to that island and he was killed as he just left a Bible there. But anyway, that's a recent thing I was talking about out in the Andaman Islands, but of India. And so as you watch, there's something that will always come out of even the fallen. And it doesn't mean that you had to first give the 4 spiritual laws and then you've now done your job. But you just simply are there, and that's part of the great victories. Sorry, Giacomo.
We'll take one more question here from Orlando, and then I know we have many, but go ahead, Sage.
I'm Sage. I work in North India. And my question to you, I felt really impacted when you said that you were going to Libya because God told you to go to every nation. And you mentioned that you heard that word when you were 13. So this is a word that you're fulfilling over decades and decades. And one thing I've learned about myself as a young leader, that lots of times I hear God wrong. And I just felt really impacted the way you stewarded that word of the Lord. And I'm just curious, was it something that was really clear and therefore you knew it was God, or was it just something you stewarded over years and years and then found out it was God because you were seeing it take place before your eyes? So simply put, how do you know when it's God and how do you know when it's you in your life?
I think you've given good language to the way it is. The words of the Lord will live with you unless you reject them. And but I didn't reject it. I just didn't know how many there were. I thought could have been 30 or 40 countries. I didn't know. Maybe if I'd have known there's that many, maybe I would have had more unbelief. But I didn't have unbelief. I just accepted it, and I think you say it well. I stewarded the word. Now I can tell you another story. I went from Madagascar to Djibouti to Somalia to Saudi Arabia. There I was locked up in a immigration place, and then I went on to Lebanon, and I was in a war with 4 different armies and bombs going off within. That was all one trip, and as I went to each place, I'd always pray, God, now send revival and let the people. I'd have prayer, and I'd walk and walk on the land, and I'd always end by saying, and Lord, send a YWAM team here. And sure enough, a little later on, I just met one of the gals that had gone in, the first one, to Djibouti. That's at the Horn of Africa. And they were the first ones. And I didn't know that for years, who it was, but I found out, a YWAM team has gone to Djibouti. And I said, yeah, I prayed over it. But I had to sleep a night on a bench in the immigration because they wouldn't let me in the country. And then on the way back out of Hargeisa, Somalia, they felt sorry for me and let me in the country. But from there, I had to go to, all those different trips. But everyone had their challenges. And yet some of them didn't seem to have a challenge at all, but it happens inside. And so what you do when you do it for God, there's going to be things that you do that you wouldn't have been trained for. You just obeyed the word of the Lord, and you got your training in there. And those are the trainings that make leaders out of non-leaders. And you have to recognize that there's something really important about it. I know you're going to have a break. What is it, in 22 minutes?
About 5 minutes.
Oh, you're going to have a break now. All right.
I want to introduce you to John Chestnut before we break. John was teaching in the earlier session. John, as you know, is the president, CEO of Wycliffe, and he's blessed us earlier today, sharing leadership principles. John, if you'd like to come forward. He wanted to stay on and hear you this first session. So we've just really been blessed by John, and maybe you'll remember that he did this wonderful video for you at the 60th. So maybe just a word from you, John, for you want to come on closer there.
Yeah, thank you, Loren. It's a delight to get to listen and just how God has continued to use you and in your story, God's unfolding story in your life, and just really grateful for that. You probably remember you came and spoke at one of our president's forums. I know that was probably one of the highlights of your life, just a couple, but we were really grateful for you doing that, and just so grateful for you, and just thank you for your life is a testimony of God's faithfulness, and what an encouragement to all of us. So thank you just for being able to sit and listen.
Well, John, I want to thank you too. I was a little snippy, and I didn't mean to be, when you asked me a while back how many YWAMers there are. And I said to you that God hadn't even told, I don't know, was it Michael the Archangel or one of them? And I said, he hadn't told me yet. And you'll understand that I wasn't trying to be snippy, but I was trying to be honest. But I can tell you this, on our 50th anniversary, Darlene and I went to, we went to 44 locations, counting Kona as the last one, but 44 locations in that year, and 107 or 109 flights that were not even 1 minute late, none of them. And we had no weather at all. There was a little shaking between Tokyo and Honolulu once, but it wasn't even turbulence. You couldn't even call it that. We had a prayer team back home here praying 24/7 for that year and for us as we traveled. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've had. and we were in Kazakhstan. We were not just in, mainland city, big Western city type things. We were all over the world, and in crazy places too. So with that, it was so smooth, so beautiful, so wonderful. And we had taken with us something that David had written up for us on a new covenant. We wanted to say to God, Lord, we're going through until everyone, we got the alls and the everys of the Great Commission. We will not stop until we, and not meaning we alone, but with all of the people of God, but our part is we will not stop until these generations that were here have heard the gospel and been started toward their discipleship. And so with that signature, everyone signed it, and we had invited the staff to come in. And like I know in Colombia, we had a guy come in. He's American, but he's up in the mountains of Peru and the Andes, and he had quite a team up there. He'd been there 20 some years, and no one had ever heard from him. We thought he'd gone home a long time ago. And he showed up, and the so-called leader of the nation, he said, I didn't know you were up there. He said, well, I was just working for Jesus, And here he is, 20 some years later, we find out he's been very faithful. But we found out a lot of people like that had been with us all of that time, and we just don't have good records, and that's the truth of the matter. But what we do have is that list that signed it with their emails and so on, and we had 32,000 of those. But some of those places, they had students come in and sign, and we didn't make a big deal out of it, and others maybe alumni. But let's say that a big percentage of them were that, which is not too many, maybe 30%. I don't think that, but anyway. But we had far more than 40% that couldn't come. There were mothers with children, they were sick, they were there, travel, visas, whatever. And we tried to make it the best place possible for everybody, if they could, to come. And so we really can't tell you how many we are. And I don't think it really matters, because when we started publishing it, I stopped them from raising it. Every time they raised it, we got more persecution. And I said, you're just asking for persecution, putting it on the website. And so anyway, yeah, I don't know how many we have. So I'm finally making it right. And
thank you, Loren.
Yeah, we're a movement. We're not an organization.
Yeah, thank you, Loren. Before we go to break, Loren, we do want you to pray for us, but let me highlight a few things that I've heard from Loren today. The first one, as soon as I posed the question, his answer went, the word of the Lord. That's how he started his answer. It was the word of the Lord. The other thing that I got out of it is that he took 2 people with him. He was never alone. He worked in teams. He modeled that to us. And I don't know how you chose those 2, but I'm sure you need an interpreter. And it was great to bring Marcus with you as well. But you always want to bring people with you on the journey, because it's not about you alone. You bring others on the journey. The other one is that Loren walked us through the what. I don't know if you heard the what. He walked us through the how. He walked us through the why. I'm here to pray for you. I'm here to pray for you. He sent 3 letters. I'm here to pray for you. In the how, he counted the cost. From previous experiences to what he was living through. He tried through air, land, and sea. And then he asked the question again, Lord, am I tracking with you? So that requires to be self-aware in your own leadership. That is one of the qualities of a leader, is to be self-aware of how God is leading you and be able to pause and say, okay, Lord, what's going on? So he walked us through that. Then he went back to prayer. Darlene went back to prayer. The whole journey was based on prayer. And Darlene said, now you're going to go through the front door. And that's how he got the visa. As all that went she also walked us through the where. And he also weaved in the story of how we got our first YWAMer in Europe. And that shows that as we follow the Lord, we're not in our own journey alone. The Lord had something in mind that it was greater than himself. And he obeyed the Lord. He kept asking and checking, should I preach? Should I preach? Should I preach? And there was something bigger than his own journey. So I got that as he was walking us through that. And then to summarize some of these things, it is the classical YWAM trilogy. You listen, you obey, and you never give up. He walked us through those things. You obey, you listen, you obey, and you never give up. So there's much more into that. The other one that really caught my attention is that we contend for nations and individuals. We got to pray for nations and we got to pray for individuals. The Lord released Rudy as Loren contended for preaching. The Lord released nations as Loren went to the nations. So we got to keep in mind that as global leaders, and this is a master's in global pioneering, we want to go to those places. He went to the farthest north, further south, east, and west. We got to do likewise in the categories that the Lord is leading you. What is your north? What is your east? What is your west? What is your south? We got to go to those places in order to lead others to the places that we've gone ourselves. So these are some of the principles, Loren. Thank you for teaching us not to walk in fear, but step out of the framework of the culture to be able to frame ourselves within a biblical worldview. And could you pray for us as we... 25-minute break and just come back. Yes, you'll come back again after a 25-minute break, but could you pray for us for this session and seal what the Lord is speaking into our hearts?
Yeah. Let me qualify something here. I mentioned we're not an organization. We are a family of ministries that are organized at local only. And so that's where we have directors and so on. But that's at a base or a location. And that isn't, that doesn't mean that we're just dealing at national levels. We're trying to remove those, and that's also has to do with coming persecution. We need to be careful on how we do this. We're modular, we're mobile. And with that, it's really important. And also, I think with that, I still am pushing into further and further granularity of geography, where I go into territories and all. I was in the Arctic praying with our leaders from the Arctic Circle, praying for a ring of fire up in a place called Iqaluit and Nunavut. And they have a street by this name. And so they had it at the airport, so I bought it. But that was the literal name of a street, road to nowhere. And that's why I think we all have to have something. By the way, I became a honorary Inuit, so I'm now of that tribe as well. But then that same year of 2008,
did you say you are ornery? Did you say you're an ornery Inuit?
No.
Ornery
That was
Inuit.
me. No, you're just confessing. That's all. Anyway, and so David and I and our wives had the opportunity to go to the Antarctic that same year. So I was in the Arctic and Antarctic, and some people think I'm bipolar now. But we went to 12 locations, but 8 of them were just penguins. Anyway, there's something that we have to do. But then what I want to get into sometime during this 3 days, I want to get from not moving from it, but now adding to it the Lord has given me a word, a very strong word, that we are now to look in granularity in the area of language. Only start from the bottom up for oral Bible translation. And that's the very small groups of languages, 1149, that have no scripture at all. And so we'll be talking about that at the other end, that we will do as all Bible translators, as Wycliffe and so many others are amazing in their sacrifice and in their diligence and so on to get textual translations done in every language on earth. So we're working together, but we're going one way, they're going another, and we are to share with each other. So I just was so grateful, not just because John's here. I say this all the time about these textual translators. They are some of the most dedicated of any I know on earth. God bless you. Lord, I pray your blessing now, and let, Lord, the word of the Lord go deeper into our hearts. And even as I was sharing the word, opening the way, and we were able in Benghazi then to have a base there over a period of time. And we thank you that we were able to do other things in Libya that we felt important in your purposes. But I pray, God, that we will see the greater word is our relationship with you, where we can commune with you, walk with you, talk with you, serve you, and worship you every day of our lives, practicing the presence of Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Loren. We'll be back in
Amen.
about 22 minutes, guys. Okay, so we're going to have a little bit shorter break, begin right at the 1:45. Thank you, Loren.
1:45.